the sort of brief sort of lowdown before we go out in the course. I've managed to talk Jerome Broussard into getting rid of a whole lot of crops canola and putting it back to grass, so it means that we've been able to reposition the start. So we're starting in this corner and doing a left-hand turn across to the pond in the trees. And the real reason for getting rid of all that, the crops there, is there was a lot of straight lines of grass through the crops, and it just means the horses are galloping up and down these avenues all the time, and I believe the horses stay in better balance if they're permanently on sort of waving lines. If they're on straight lines, they can get a bit jarred, because they gallop on their heads and the riders don't support them so well. So it's taken me a couple of years, but Jerome has eventually given in, and he did say to me the other day when we were standing on the top of the hill, I was here about 3 weeks ago, and he thought it looked fantastic. And I said, well, that's good, because I'm going to start on you very soon for the next bit of crop that I want rid of. But he suddenly became silent and walked in the opposite direction. So there are changes, we've tweaked it a bit, and you'll see as we go around, we'll chat about the exciting bits as we go. Straight line to the first, and then a turn, and then a swinging turn out to fence 3, and then the fun start. So it's a sort of gentle start, but it allows them to attack big fences and just get galloping and be bold, before they have to start to be technical as well. What I like at the start of the bigger tracks is to have big dimensions. You know, some designers start with a couple of little fences and build up, but for me, I think if the horses are at this level, of this 3-star level, and you give them little fences, they start off thinking, oh, this is nothing to concentrate on, and they get careless and they run at the fences too fast. Building the big fences like this, it means that it backs the horses off. The riders have got to ride them, and from the word go, the riders and the horses have respect for what they're going to jump. So I don't really like brush fences at the beginning, and I don't like small fences. I like to keep the fences up to height. They've got plenty of fences in the warm-up to get them ready, so they don't need to be warmed up on the course. Once they're on the course, the nitty-gritty started. Again, having got rid of the crops here, we've got a little bit of terrain, so suddenly, when the crops are there, you can't see those dips like that. And, you know, when it's in grass, we've got a chance to use it. So this has only just been sown away to grass, so it's not really thick yet. It'll be another year before it's perfect. So we're not using it too much, but we're running through here, and then we're using this nice friendly fence up the hill, coming out of the dip and attacking. So the American flag for the 3-star, and here on the left you're about to have a Scottish flag.
Awesome.
We're coming out this way, and then the advanced and the 2-star are going back along there, so I just didn't want them crashing into each other, so it's only there to split the tracks up. And then for the 3-star, I like to give my first combination at fence 4, but I've been a little bit mean here because I've got 2 corners, and so it's a bit tough really. So what I've done, instead of making it 4AB, I've made it 4 and 5. So if they jump the first corner and it's not great, they can circle and then represent to 5 to the second corner, and they won't get penalties. If I made it an AB and they weren't ready in the circle, they'd get 20 penalties. So I'm being a bit tough with the questions, but I've been kind in that I've given them a way out of it. It's not that big a corner, but as soon as you get here, suddenly the opening on the left is pretty obvious. And then they've got a bending line, and I think it measured 5, but quite honestly, they do what they like. Some of them will try and jump across this and straight line it to 5. Others will swing way wide and come back at it. So sometimes I think you'd be just as well dropping the fences out of the sky and letting them work out their own distances. But when you position the fences, you've got to have I've got to have in my mind that this is the line I want them to ride, and that's going to work on the distance if they ride that line. If they want to pick another line, it's up to them. It's no big deal. Whatever they're comfortable with. You know, there are corners, but they're not that difficult. The sport's more and more going to open corners rather than filled in corners, because when they're filled in they can cheat and they can angle across them. And sometimes you get, you've got your, like here, the white flag on the left, the red flag they just put here, so one flag. And for me, if they do that, that's encouraging the incorrect line of the jump. So what I'd like to do is put double flags on the outside, and so that it channels them in the direction you want to go. So they can't cheat too much and come across left to right because the red flag's in the way. And if they want to go the other way, they can't sort of aim here and jump something that's too wide. So you're making sure they jump the correct place. And for me, it frames it for the horses. And corners are probably the worst ridden fences on a course. And people have a big hang up. And the ideal is, you dissect your corner at 90 degrees to the long side, and you should be at 90 degrees to that center line. And so by putting the flags like that, you're actually telling the riders that's where to ride it. And if they start angling it, they're at risk of running out. And also, when that comes to a 90-degree corner, if you're cheating, the horse is not going to be able to stay on a line at 90 degrees. And if you try and make it easier by straightening up the front, you're going to end up in the middle of it, especially when it's open rails. So I believe that right from your training level, they should be taught to jump corners in the correct line. And quite often I'd put, if it was a training question at home, I'd put a couple of trees out here and say, go between the trees, so there'd be 2 trees here and then the flag, and I basically put them on the line. So it's teaching the riders and the horses from the baby sort of level. So first ditch, it looks huge from here, but from the approach there's an uphill ramp to it. So you can see, and this bump was here already, and there was a bit of a dip there. So we just made use of this, turfed it, and so it's an uphill approach, which hides a bit of the ditch, but it means they can attack up the hill. And when they get here, it's not that big a fence. If there was no ditch there, it's nothing. In fact, there's a ditch there, but it's an introduction to what's to come later on. So there's 3 conifer trees here. If you were here last year, you know that we jumped over that palisade and used the pond. But the pond's too deep now, so the track around the pond that we use is underwater, so we couldn't use it. So 1 out of 3 years we've been able to use it. So I've hunted around, found some. This was all overgrown and rough. So we're coming through here, and as I say, 3 conifer trees here, and I just thought it sort of loaned itself to being keyholes. You can make, we've got some keyhole fences that are on frames that are portable, but these actually, they're just the 3 trees, and it was a perfect measurement to sort of stick the holes in. So I know already that people have been driving past, and they say adrenaline is brown, but they'd be making a mess on their underwear, having a look at it. And so they jump through here, the big boy's on the right, and then it's a tight turn to the first brush in the hedgerow. And then the 2-star have got the left-hand brush. So it's the same question again for each class, but it's just a slightly softer turn for the 2-star. But I love that because it looks more natural than that sort of portable frame. So they had 2 questions in a row there, the corners and the keyholes. Now it's just a big gallopy fence before they have the next question. So this is actually a little bit softer than it was. I brought the bank in about 1.5 feet with the fence in, so it was another 1.5 feet wider, and it was a bit taller, and I built the ramp up on landing because the first year I think we had a few jumped in the ditch and 2 or 3 fell off as well. So
I was one of those last year.
So the idea is really, it's just a gallopy fence, but they've got to be brave to this, but then they've got to be accurate to the next one. I need to get my clippers out and clip the tree a little bit. So what is interesting, I put this same question last year, and we had 4 strides down there, but a couple of the horses jumped it so boldly, landed, and just kept attacking and went on 3. And that's fine. If that's what your horse is like, then you have to go for it. You have to be ready to adjust when you're on a course. It's not just, you have the plan in your head, but if it doesn't work, you've got to react to what's happening underneath you. So if suddenly you jump way out running, then you know you're not going to get there on force. There's no point in ripping the horse's head off and running out, so you might as well just go with the flow and get the 3. And then after you've landed, then you can start breathing again. We call these at home stick piles. I don't know what you call them over here, but it gives us an open oxer, and the good thing about it, they're portables. You can move them around wherever you want. If we built a proper oxer and posted it into the ground, then it would all have to be on frangible pins, you know, for safety reasons. But when we do these stick piles, it still gives us an oxer, but because it's a wider base spread, it's more inviting to jump, and it means that I can move them around the course, and so they're really useful fences to have. But the riders pay respect because they're open. You know, if that was a filled-in table, then they might take a pull less and go a little bit miles per hour faster into it. But when it's open in the middle, they tend to sit up and pay attention, which is what it's all about, really. It's, you know, you want to make the course as horse-friendly and as safe as possible, but you want the riders to respect it. And if they think they can take a risk, then, you know, we're all human. We take the risk.
Yeah.
And 99% of the time we get away with it, and then 1% we don't. And so you want to try and make the riders, you know, have a bit of respect for the course. So the duck in, and then it's a related distance. So if the riders jump in over the duck and keep the horse in balance, then they should meet this absolutely spot on, and then it's a bounce over this. But because this is a bounce, they're deemed to have presented at this. So if they fall out the step and they pull out to the side, they get a 20 penalty. So they have no choice but to be presented at this. If they have a stop, then they can turn around and jump the alternative there. They don't have to go back into the water and represent. I was standing up here and I said to Bert that I wanted a lip and an interspace fence, and he said, well, we've got a frame. So they had this framework sitting around in the store pile, and they arrived up with the framework, and then they wired it back into the bank, and we filled it with stone and everything, and we'd done it, and then Jerome arrived. Once he agreed it was a good idea, he said we needed to turf it, so it looks great. And it's not that big a fence. I could have been a little bit meaner, but it's still quite a big drop. And they're running all the way downhill to the moose, and then there's another big drop. So I didn't want to be too mean at this drop, but when they land on downhill terrain, it softens the drop. It's all about the horses being brave enough to jump, but they're not getting jarred the landing, so they land running down the hill, so it shouldn't really put any pressure on their joints and legs. They shouldn't land running, but then it's a question of whether the rider is in control or not. Because the course is pretty flat, so they've been galloping quite fast, and they'll probably gallop up that hill, round the turn, set up, jump, and then the horse will be thinking we're off again. And they need to be in control because they go down the hill, jump the moose and turn right to the fish in the water, a 90-degree turn. So they need to be properly in control the whole way down here. And this was another big drop, and because it's into water, it was flat landing. And so when it's flat landing on a big drop like that, they do tend to land and then it's a sort of big effort to get up again. So you can see that they're not landing directly into water. We've ramped up the landing to give them a softer landing so that they can land still running and be in balance to turn to the fish. And I don't mind that they're not landing in water. The odd horse will jump big and get the water, but most will land on the bank. But I still think it's a big enough question without them landing in water. So that I'm quite happy to have that ramp. I think it's nicer to the horses, and to be honest, if every drop they jump is landing on flat ground and getting jarred, the horse's career would be shortened enormously. So I think we have to think about that, and you know, this is only one competition in the rider and the horse's career, and so I'm a great believer in trying to keep the horses on the road. Test them, but keep them on the road. This is the fence that put Philip Dutton on the floor last year. But I was up there in the tent watching him, and I have to say it was a classic miss. And even Philip agreed. he had all that time along there to get it right, and he got it wrong. So he ended up on the floor. But, you know, it happens to all of us, and I quite often think, and again, you know, I said at the beginning, I don't like these long straight gallops. It's the most difficult thing on a long straight gallop to know how much to set your horse up and how much to leave it to the horse and how much rhythm to keep. Because we've got all that distance, and if we set up way back, we're wasting precious seconds. And so we leave it as late as possible, and sometimes we leave it too late, and sometimes we just interfere and we hook until we miss. You know, so we're our own worst enemies in many ways, but we all do it. And the longer the approach, the easier it is to get it wrong. That's why I like turns, and especially for young horses and novice classes, the lower levels, I like them to come to fences off turns as much as possible, because then you've done a lot of the setting up for the horses and the riders. But for 3-star, I would expect them to get it right themselves. I know we're not allowed to call these coffin fences anymore, but it is a coffin jump. But it completely goes against this wide triple brush is completely against the idea of a coffin fence and a coffin canter. So if you think of the intermediate, they've only got one stride and landing, and they're downhill to the ditch. So they need that short, bouncy canter. Here, they need that same balancing up here, balance, but then they've got to be positive to this. And so they're going to end up jumping this a little bit faster. And because it's a spread, I couldn't put them on one stride, so I've given them 2 strides, which means they can still attack that. Then they can sit up, keep a hold of the front end, jump, and 1 stride out. But that is a stride to the C element, so if they're in a mess hanging off here, if they can negotiate the ditch, they can turn right to that roll top on the downhill, and they won't get 20 penalties. As long as it's the rider's decision that they bypass that. But I'll be interested to see the reactions to this. I have done this I did a triple brush in with a rail out in England a couple of years ago, and I know that the triple brush in had them all really confused about how to ride the fence. So we haven't got the 3-star riders out here yet, so I'll be interested to see what they think. But it does work. I have used it, but I haven't used the triple brush out. But I think they'll ride, by comparison, they'll ride the 3-star much more attackingly than they will the 2-star, which would be absolutely right in my book. Jerome was really keen that we made a feature of the water here, and you'll remember that everything on the left of the island was what was here last year. And so after the event last year, we agreed the sort of size we were going to do, and the diggers came in and came back, and this is what we had. It's brilliant. And so I was really keen to use this bank, because again, any bit of terrain I can get hold of, the better here. So wanted to come downhill, so we've got the gator on here. 5 strides on a turn to the brush corner, and then 5 strides back into the water to the shrimp cocktail. It's for the 3-star. The 2-star go in over the moccasin snake, and then the keyhole, and then they come out this corner and go round, and then in the causeway in the next water there's the Ogopogo that's been here lots before. But it sort of works quite well. They'll gallop along there, and then if it were me, I'd gallop along on the flat, and then I'd come up just to the sort of longer patch of grass there. Yep. I would come up onto there, and then get balance up here, and then get straight to this. They'd make a mistake if they only curved up here and started to come off the turn, I think, because I think they'd be more likely to leave a leg at it. I think I'd come along there and give the horse plenty of time to see this and assess it. It actually, when you're down at it, it's only 1.5 meters the height, but it looks big. But it's actually quite little. But it's the downhill approach, and then where they're going to land, again, it's quite a big drop down. They're going to land just on the edge of the water, I think. depending on how brave they are. And then I know that if they jump in really big, the riders are going to be tempted to knife across there and try and go in forward. But for me, they should be jumping this straight, landing and staying a little bit right-handed and then turning back onto the bank. And that way they'll get 5, and then they'll be more in balance for the next. If they go across there in 4, then they're going to be in a bit of a mess by the time they get to the shrimp cocktail. Because that'll mean they're really long and strung out, and then they'll get there, and will it be 4 or will it be 5? And if they push for 4 and they don't get it, then they take an early bath. This is 2-star CCI and also the advanced horse trials. So the horses here are new. Bart's wife Chris just by freehand drew them and then cut them out, and then they finished painting them last night. And then the bar here has got different levels going through, but the doors are chalked up and then they drop down depending on what level we can move the doors up and down. The very last fence is a single fence, but the 3 before that are all doubles, and for me it sort of works quite well because it stops people going too fast at the end of the course. It's so tempting to just make up speed if you're down in the clock, to just gallop these last few fences. But if you've got doubles, then they're not just one stride, they're 4 or 5 strides, and so they've got to ride them accordingly. So that slows the riders down a bit. It stops them galloping to the line. So whilst I was saying at the beginning, I want big fences, big up to height, maximum spreads. At the end of the course, I wouldn't do that, because if horses are getting tired, and you don't really want to be tripping them up by having really wide spreads, because they'll keep jumping, but they might struggle to get the distance if you've got the big maximum height top spread. So these are, if anything, a fraction small, but they've still got to concentrate because it's a related distance, and it'd be very easy to make a stupid mistake and trip over that egg. So it doesn't have to necessarily be big. It's just got to make them sort of take a pull and have a think. And then, I keep saying there's not much terrain here, but we can up and down quite a bit at the end of the course, so they've got to save a bit of their stamina and not gallop the legs off the horses at the beginning. And then again down the hill to the last mound before. And we put the train as the last fence this year. The train was part of the town last year, and I think it got lost in too much there. So I think it's much better with the town, and then the train there is a much better last fence for the horses. Tired horses are going to ride up this hill, jump the rail, then 2 strides over the steps and back down to the train. So right till the very last, they're going to have to be preserving energy, and it's all about stamina. And for me, that's what it should be about. The horses, I don't want to just see them gallop around a flat course and everybody go inside the time. I want them thinking about the galloping open stretches at the beginning, what effect it'll have on their horses when they get here. So it's all about getting them thinking.